Hello everybody. Some of you may know that for a while now I've been making a mod for Slay the Spire that allows external processes to communicate with the game. It's called Communication Mod, and you can find a link to it in the description of this video. When making the mod, however, I felt like I needed to release it with a little demo to show what it could be used to do. This is what I came up with. As far as I know, this is the first AI to win an entire game of Slay the Spire by itself. In this video, I'll show you this AI as it beats the game with each character. I'll note that the goal of this project was not to play particularly well or demonstrate interesting AI techniques. The behavior of the AI is hard-coded, and the skill level is intended to be barely good enough to win without cheating. However, I still find it rather hypnotic to watch it zoom through the game, and I'm always rooting for it, even against the odds. It can also be used as a baseline for further improvements. Probably one of the first things you noticed is how fast the game is being played. Actually, the video I am showing you is not sped up at all. This is the original speed at which the game was being played. Instead, I am using a mod called SuperFastMode, which dramatically speeds up or removes most of the animations from the game. This lets the AI complete runs much faster, which was a big help in testing, and, in my opinion, just much more entertaining to watch. I made sure Communication Mod was compatible with SuperFastMode for this reason. In fact, Communication Mod is capable of running the game so fast with SuperFastMode on that I have artificially slowed the AI down. It waits 7/100ths of a second before taking each action, for example before playing each card or before clicking each button in an event. If it didn't, there would be a lot of things that would happen so quickly you wouldn't even be able to see them happening. Sometimes, people have asked me after watching these videos whether I consider Communication Mod a tool for tassing or creating tool-assisted speedruns of the game. While you can create a replay of the game fairly easily with Communication Mod, I still wouldn't consider it a real TAS, because the mod generally bypasses the interface of the game and can perform several actions faster than humanly possible. For example, it does not need to wait for the map to scroll when entering a new act, but can immediately choose a map node at the bottom off the screen. This is not an input that can be done when playing normally. And in an event, it can click the buttons instantly, without needing to wait for them to become clickable. One of the first tests I did with Communication Mod, though, was to create a replay of one of Jorbs' Ironclad runs. I've linked a video of that run in the description, though it also uses SuperFastMode and a much older version of Communication Mod. As we come to the end of the Ironclad run, I should say a few words about the strategy it is using. For Ironclad, I thought it would be fun to go for the so-called Perfected Strike strategy. The general idea here is to take all of the Perfected Strike cards that are offered, remove defense first at shops, replacing them with efficient defensive cards like Shrug It Off, Rage, Flame Barrier, and Impervious, and burst down the enemies as quickly as possible. I thought it should be very simple for an AI to play the strategy, which is important because the AI does not actually know what any of its cards do. The only information about cards programmed into the AI is whether they generate block, though not how much, plus a rough priority order for playing and picking the cards. It does know how much damage is being done by each enemy, and tries not to overblock too much. Really, the logic for playing cards is very simple. Play zero-cost skills, then non-zero-cost cards according to a priority order, unless they overblock and there's other stuff to play. Then, play the zero-cost attacks in priority order. This basic logic seems to work well enough for my purposes here, though there are a lot of mistakes that are made in practically every combat. At the very least, you can see that this basic logic was good enough to beat the game with the Ironclad. With the help of Demon Form, one of the highest priority Ironclad cards, it easily took out Time Eater in just a few turns with some extremely buffed attacks. Next, after Ironclad, comes the Silent. For the Silent, there was really only one overall strategy that I ever considered using: to play defensive cards and kill your enemies with strong powers. So, the AI takes a few attack cards like Dagger Spray, but mostly looks for stuff like Footwork and Afterimage for defense, and Thousand Cuts and Noxious Fumes for offense. Ideally, it just gets to the point where it can block for more than it ever needs to every turn, while the Noxious Fumes slowly chips away at the enemy health. This is a large contrast to the overall approach of the Ironclad strategy, which wins fights much more quickly. I actually thought that this silent strategy would be the highest win rate of the strategies that I implemented for each character. I consider this overall game plan to be one of the simplest ways to get a first silent win, and there's little that can go wrong once you have a few copies of Footwork in play. But in actuality, the AI struggles quite a bit, and Silent actually has the lowest win rate of the three classes. Playing turns using a simple heuristic fails quite badly when a large number of enemies scale their damage very quickly and you don't have nearly as much time as you would like to set up powers. Also, there's a lot of other little things that hurt the Silent. Notably, for example, I've seen the Silent AI kill herself by playing Dagger Spray on Spikers way too many times. Speaking of win rate, over 100 runs of each character, the Silent has an estimated 5 to 6% win rate, the Ironclad comes in second at about 7 to 8%, and the Defect is the most successful at around 10%. I'm pretty happy with these numbers actually, given the extreme simplicity of the AI. I feel like there is much more the AI does not know how to do than it does know. One of the big things the AI does not know about is the enemies. The agent you see playing doesn't actually know what any enemies or any powers in the game do. Instead, it just follows the same strategy, the same logic, no matter what enemy it faces. It doesn't know that it needs to block extra damage against the Spire growth in Act 3. Or, as I mentioned earlier, that playing attacks against Spikers is gonna hurt if you don't have block. It gets caught off guard by the turn abruptly ending when facing Time Eater. And perhaps most importantly, it has no idea that blocking against Gremlin Nog can be fatal. Really, if I just added some special logic for facing Gremlin Nob alone, that would probably vastly improve the win rate, as Gremlin Nob is the single deadliest enemy to the AI by far. But on the other hand, I do consider that sort of improvement to be outside the scope of this project. I welcome anyone who wants to make something more sophisticated. If you're wondering how it's choosing which enemy to attack, the decision is purely based off HP. Attacks are used against the lowest HP enemy, and skills are used on the highest HP enemy. This works well for a lot of battles, but is particularly bad in a few cases. For example, against Centurion and Mystic, you would like to attack the Centurion, who tends to have the highest HP. And when using Corpse Explosion, you usually want to use that on the target with the lowest HP for this AI. I actually ended up lowering the priority of Corpse Explosion quite a bit since the AI is so bad at using it right now. For most other card and relic choices in the game, the decision is made, again, in a priority order. The AI chooses the highest priority card, upgrades the highest priority card, removes the lowest priority card, picks the highest priority boss relic, and so on. Pretty much the only remaining choices to be made, other than those, are which event choices to make and which map paths to take. For events, the choice does depend somewhat on the event. An early version of the AI, before it even managed to win once, would just pick the first available option at every event. I was curious to see if that was going to be good enough. But at that point, all I had going was the Ironclad, and it kept getting to Act 2 and trading away all its strikes for bikes, which basically threw away the game when all the perfected strikes became worthless. I still thought that maybe I didn't need to do anything with specific events, but then the AI got to knowing Skull for the first time, and suicided itself on option 1 by repeatedly trading HP for a colorless card. So then I decided that was the last straw. Now, there's 8 events where the AI, instead of picking the first available option, picks the last available option. And that works pretty well. So if you are wondering why the AI is always taking Niao option 1, that's why. There's no custom logic there for Niao, even if Niao's first option is often pretty awful, like a random colorless card. And finally, for pathing on the map, the AI is just running a shortest path algorithm at the beginning of each act, with weights assigned to each type of node depending on the character and the act. For example, in Act 2, I have the Silent maximize the number of rest sites, then maximize the number of elites, then the number of shops and question mark nodes, then the number of normal fights. But for Defect in Act 2, I minimize the number of elites, then maximize the number of rest sites. Defect struggles quite a bit with those Act 2 elites, for the most part. Speaking of the Defect, we are a third of the way into our Defect run, so I should talk about what sort of card priorities are used by the Defect AI. While I considered several different possible Defect strategies, I eventually settled on an overall orb and power focus, prioritizing most heavily the cards that interact with orbs. With all of the passive power generated by orbs, the AI relies much less on playing accurately every turn. Also, the sheer power level of many Defect cards is extremely high compared to Silent, which also has a more power-oriented strategy. In the runs that the Defect wins, it generally gets very powerful orb synergies going, simultaneously generating extremely large amounts of block and damage every turn. And that's about all I wanted to say about the AI. If you want to check it out, there's a link in the description of the video to the source code for the AI, which is written in Python 3. If you like using Python, the code there can also be fairly easily modified to make something like Twitch plays Slay the Spire, for example. I'd be happy to see other people using these projects as a starting point to do cool things with Slay the Spire. And with that, I'll leave you with the Defect in Act 3. Thanks for watching.